What's going on YouTube? My name is Mr. Crippled, and today I wanted to talk about the current state of solo lane. Now, before we get into the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you'd like to keep up with any future content, I will be leaving a link to my Twitch and my Discord in the description below. Now, the reason why I want to talk about this is that there's been a lot of talk about the current meta in solo, especially with the last Titan talk. People are complaining about that there's not really a meta, there's not really much to do, it's kind of boring, or they're tired of seeing off picks in the lane. And I kind of wanted to give my 2 cents on it, plus any fixes that could possibly help the solo lane. And so, without further ado, let's just go ahead and get right into it. The first thing I want to talk about are the issues. Like I stated before, there really isn't a meta or um like a set amount of gods that can really be played in this role. However, the real question is whether or not this is actually an issue. To me, in my opinion, in solo lane, you don't necessarily need to be an off tank. You just need to play your role properly, which is one of three things in my opinion. One, being a third or fourth DPS, not third or fourth, third DPS option for your team, i.e., characters like Aladdin, who can force another DPS or another tank out the fight and just burst somebody down. You could also go Bruiser, which a lot of people want to do. So your characters like Odin, Hercules, the Bracken, Cerberus, characters like that, or somebody who's meant to be like a secondary support, who's meant to basically help protect their backline just as much as the support is, but with more damaging options. These people can be like Sobek or Geb or even like Kepri, something that's just kind of like an off roll. And personally, I don't mind that there isn't really a meta for solo, right? Because the problem with solo back from Smite, even especially in Smite 1, is that you only had the option of being a off tank or a bruiser. And then when people started introducing like mage solos, people were complaining, but you had to admit that they're actually added a variety to solo lane. I just think there might just needs to be a delicate balance because the bruisers right now don't feel that great to play, which kind of brings me to my next point, aspects versus traditional solos. Recently, we've been seeing a lot more aspects give different gods tankiness or basically switch them up so they could be a support. The very first one being like Cupid, where his aspect reduced his damage output, but it added a health shield and bigger healing on his one, making him a lot more interactive to play. Others like Vulcan or Apollo or even Pele soon followed suit, where they got defensive passive that made them more tanky and made them a lot more interactive in solo lane. Other characters got like Baron just got a huge damage boost where it feels really impossible to fight them one on one. Or you got characters like Ganesha where their most value is just being in a full DPS role. Well, that kind of leaves the traditional solo laners like Odin, Hercules, or even somebody like Bracken to be less interactive and less fun because they've always been the same since one. And the problem with the traditional solo laners as well is that most of them are mid or boring. Exceptions to that being like Achilles, who, he's still boring, but he's so tanky and so good right now that you kind of get past it. He's kind of like a top tier solo. Everybody else, or even like Chalk, but even Chalk is more of a mage and plays the AFK game um better than most of the other warriors, so he can compete with those full screen solo laners like Hunters or Baron or even Hades because he has options to play safe. But the other ones just aren't as fun anymore. um I also do think that there is a problem with the AFK farming in Smite 2. A lot of people have been complaining about that, and especially now you've been seeing characters like Don Zaburo build full mage and still be able to completely nuke towers by himself, no minions. And you also have the side camps, the non-neutral camps, where it creates a situation where you just clear the wave, you look at the other person, then just leave and go clear something else, which kind of takes away from player interaction because they have so many safe options. Um, there also is another issue that's not really an issue, but people have been complaining about it, and solo laners kind of aren't excused from this, and that's just lifesteal. If you don't innately have lifesteal or some form of anti-heal in your kit, your experience of solo lane is going to vastly differ. And um because lifesteal is capped only at 75%, and the early game life anti-heal options really aren't that good, you run into an issue to where you just, if you don't have something to deal with the healing, or you just don't win the matchup, you are going to have a very bad time until it's rotation phase. For example, if you just want to have fun, right, and you're picking Nemesis or Odin, or who else doesn't have lifesteal? Maybe like a Matarasu out of solo, but then you're into somebody like Baron, Anubis, Hades, Pele, and more, or somebody like Mordred, you will not, and you don't get anti-heal early, you're gonna have a very bad time. But at the same token, getting anti-heal early stops you from being able to box. Ruinous Ankh is the most go-to tank anti-heal item in the game, but the protections it gives really isn't that strong. The anti-heal is good, but you don't get any health from it, so you're not really gonna survive long enough. And because it's mostly just for the anti-heal and not doesn't really give you anything else as far as protections or damage or anything like that, if the other person is building tankier than you, or if they're building more lifesteal on top of it, yeah, they're gonna get anti-healed, but they're still gonna out DPS you and out sustain you because you're trying to stop them from out sustaining you. And it just makes it to where it's a little bit more difficult. For that, I just think that some anti-heal cards need an overhaul, but I don't think that's really an issue with solo lane per se. Um, so now I want to talk about how they can fix solo. Again, I don't think there really is an issue with solo lane. I think there is just, it's too easy. Forget my language here, but it's just too easy to play like a pussy in solo. The whole point of the lane, damage, tank, or otherwise, is you're supposed to box the other person. And there's too many safe ways or long range characters that can just safely clear the wave, or they never have to fight you for it to be interactive. And plus, since the neutral camps that you have besides the totem don't really make that much of a difference for contesting them, you run into it. Again, you run into that issue to where it's just too, there's not enough player interaction. So things to fix that is, one, I think the side camps, the personal side camps that the lanes get, they should be removed. I think they should consolidate them into one neutral camp and increase the amount of EXP earned and make the tanks tankier every 10 to 15 minutes. But they provide that team gold. They provide a huge boost in EXP, not like half a bar or anything like that, but it's going to be a noticeable difference if you're able to take those over the other solo laner. And the reason why I want them to make it tankier is because then it gives the opportunity for the other solo laner to come over and contest to try to take that from the other, to stop the other solo laner from taking the full EXP, or at least mooch some of it off of it, creating more player interaction. I do think there should also be better bruiser options out of solo as far as items go. There just really isn't a lot. For example, I personally hate fighting magical solos, mostly because there's no good bruiser magical solo items for you to deal with those gods. They kind of try to have that with like Onsile or buffing like Void Shield or Void Stone to kind of make up for that, but physicals don't have a card like, what is it? Not Jade Scepter, Jade Helmet. It's a magical item that gives you protections every single time you hit a basically you hit somebody who has physical damage. But it also gives you magic damage. It also gives you intelligence scaling, and it also gives you physical defense. So it's a bruiser item meant for mages or people with intelligence scaling, but everybody else is SOL. I think there needs to be better options like that for physicals. I also do think there needs to be better health items for bruisers as well. The health items that we have for solo are kind of lackluster. The only ones we really have access to is cards like Oni Hunter's Garb or Draconic Plate. Outside of that, the other health items are very boring, or situational depending on the god that you're using. For example, Apollo solo has Eros bow that gives him health, attack speed, and it directly correlates to his passive, but he's the only one who can really use it. Um, I just think there needs to be better bruiser options. Another thing that I think they should add as well is probably start introducing some auras back. Now, I know this was an issue in Smite 1 to where supports were kind of complaining that there wasn't really a lot of interaction because they just had to build a bunch of auras and just be an aura bot and just kind of stand there. And they introduced actives and took away auras to kind of make up for that, to make support a little bit more interactive. I think that now that we have actives, I think it could be a good idea to introduce some auras, but I also know that adding auras will make tanks even tankier and more more annoying to deal with, to say the least. So I think that auras should be considered but not immediately implemented. I think some changes to some items need to be made before auras can really be introduced back into the game. Um, an obvious thing that solo lane could also use is just more interesting tanks. Like Cthulhu was somebody in Smite 1 that was so much fun to play in Smite 1 because he offered something a little bit more interactive. But he was also a little bit more scary because he played full screen, but that was only because they nerfed him a bunch of times. But I like the direction they're going with these aspects, where they're making traditional like hunters or mages more into bruisers to give them something else to do other than just being DPSs. I think that should be something that should be considered when adding in new gods as well. Like Sun Wukong is the next god that's going to be coming out, I believe, on the 14th. And Sun Wukong is obviously a welcome change, but Sun Wukong is still another boring solo laner. It's just going to feed into the AFK farming meta, where he's just gonna sit at the very front, at the very back of the wave, hit one button, full clear, and then just run away from the entirety of the game. We need more solos that reward you for being aggressive and for taking the aggressive front, and has the possibility of falling behind if they don't fight enough. Um, I also think there should be a new buff added to the game. Yeah, we have blue, we have red, we have yellow, we have purple. I think a new buff specific for a neutral buff would be something interesting. Um, like an orange buff that gives you protections based equal to like 10% of your item protections, and then maybe also give it like a little bit of lifesteal as well. That's and how it could work and how they can balance it. Like I said, it should only give you protections based off of your item protections rather than passive protections. So characters like Thor, Pele, or Anubis who have protection passives don't really get a lot of benefit from it. But when they start building tank and have to build tankier, that way you don't just run into straight up DPSs that are just tanky as hell for no reason. I also think that for something like this buff, it should flip depending on what you build. So if you want to be a DPS and you just want a DPS out of solo, then the orange buff gives you lifesteal rather than protections. But if you're building for somebody like a bruiser, the orange buff gives you that protection buff rather. I don't think this is like an end all be all thing. I think that's also just something that gives the solo laner something else to contest and fight over. And that way you can make it a little bit more interactive. But those are just my thoughts on solo lane. Let me know what you guys think and what you think they should add to solo to make it more fun for people who are coming into the game. Thank y'all for watching, and y'all take care.